Welcome back to Real Takes, where we are all movie love all the time. I'm Ann Stott, and tonight we're starting the way we usually do, which is talking about a cause or an organization that I'd love for people to support. And because we are now officially in the holiday season, there are usually local organizations that coordinate getting presents for children whose families can't afford to give them presents. And now, the local organizations I know about also facilitate getting gift cards for heat or groceries to families that are struggling with heat and groceries and things like that too. So I'll post links to the local toy drive that I know about. But please just consider supporting, families in need at this time so that children can be warm and have clothes they need and some joy in the holiday season. So again, I'll link below, but please consider giving to your own local organizations for that as well. And tonight we are officially in Sagittarius season. We actually crossed over last week, but I did that whole Thanksgiving thing, so I didn't get into it. But we are now in the time of Sagittarius, and every astrological sign has produced interesting, dynamic film directors, but I think of Sagittarius as being a particularly director-friendly astrological sign. The Sagittarians are fire signs. They have a lot of gumption. They've got a lot of go, and Sagittarians are often iconoclasts. They're leaders and loners. They like to go their own way. They don't like to be told what to do. And I think of directors as being leaders and loners together. Obviously, they're leading, this massive project through all its various creative stages, but there's something kind of lonely about being the leader in that situation. You're surrounded by people, but they all need something from you. And at the end of the day, you're the one who's going to take the heat for anything that goes wrong. It's a big job directing a film, right? And there have been a lot of important original Sagittarian directors. So I'm just going to read a few here. Fritz Lang, George Stevens, Otto Preminger, a huge rebel in every way. Terrence Malick, Agnieszka Holland, who I personally love, Catherine Bigelow, Steven Spielberg, Alfonso Cuarón, Jean-Luc Godard, the incredibly influential Japanese director Ozu, Ruben Neda, J.C. Chandor, and Jeff Nichols are all just like a sampling of Sagittarian directors. So lots of great work from Sagittarian directors, but tonight we are talking about the truly iconoclastic original John Cassavetes, who I think sort of embodies what it means to be a Sagittarian artist, and in this case, a Sagittarian actor and filmmaker. So John Cassavetes is often talked about as the father of American independent cinema. There was independent cinema happening before him, but he is certainly his work is a milestone. It's a before and after moment in American independent cinema. So he was an actor who got into directing films, and his first film came out in 1958. It was called Shadows, and it's a film set in sort of the jazz world of New York City in the 50s, and centers around a group of friends, a group of interracial friends and relatives, and what those relationships are like. And it's a film very much about racism, but he sort of rejected that. And he said that, he saw it as a film that was about personal relationships. And in that sense, it definitely wasn't like an issue film in the typical Hollywood sense. We were just following people and sort of watching their experiences and their feelings, but he was also taking on the issue of racism within the context of this film in a way that certainly no Hollywood film had done ever, and wouldn't really be done by a white director again for a very long time in this country, and very rarely even then. So that was his first film in 1958. Now, he was very influenced by the Italian neorealists. I haven't talked about them a lot on this channel, but the neorealists came out of World War II, and they rejected the melodrama that had been a part of particularly American cinema, but some European cinema as well, leading up to World War II, because they had just been through such a brutal reality that they felt like showing reality as it was far more dramatic and important and powerful than creating melodrama. And their work in the late 40s and 50s had this massive effect on all cinema going forward, and certainly on American filmmakers in the 50s. And Cassavetes has talked about E. Vitelloni as being important to him, Umberto D. as being important to him, Bellissima as being important to him, La Terra Trema as being important to him. Obviously, Visconti, Rossellini, and De Sica were, three of the big Italian neorealists that a lot of American filmmakers in the 50s and 60s were looking to for inspiration. But he also talked about New York City independent filmmakers. Is this Morris Engel? I don't know his work at all, so this is information to me. Lionel Rogosin, and also the independent filmmaker Shirley Clark, who was working in New York City in the 50s. So, now we talk about independent cinema, and there's a whole sort of independent cinema industry, and there's a range of independent cinema from, work for very small budgets, ranging to work for $20 million that then gets distributed by a big studio. But when we talk about John Cassavetes' independent cinema, basically what would happen is he would get a role in a big Hollywood film, and then he would use the money from that to make a movie that was often shot in his own house, using very experienced actors who we'll talk about in a minute, but also using people who'd never been in film before. These were rough and tumble independent films that had no distributor. Once they were made, the first few of them, basically they were distributed by John Cassavetes and his wife, an actress and often star of his films, Gena Rowlands, looking through newspapers from around the country and looking for the films they liked and where those films were being played, and then calling up those movie theaters and saying, we have a movie for you, and sending it to them. So this is like down and dirty independent cinema. And it's very interesting to hear, to read interviews with Cassavetes, because he didn't have any, in the interviews I've read, and I'm, no expert, but he didn't have animosity toward Hollywood cinema. He just was very clear. He said, it's a matter of taste. He said, I want to make film as art, and they're making film as commerce, and there are great filmmakers doing that. That's just not the filmmaking I want to be doing. And he even said, when he talked about films that influenced him, he talked about Frank Capra as one of the greatest filmmakers ever. And in a later interview from the 80s, he had just seen E.T., and he talked about how much he liked E.T. and what a great movie it was. So there wasn't a sense of animosity. There was just a desire and a hunger to be doing something different. And in one interview, he talked about how much he loves cinema, and yet when he made Hollywood films, he missed the sense of freedom and life that he felt when he was making theater, and he wanted to try to make cinema that felt that free and alive. And he certainly made cinema that felt that free and alive. And when he made Shadows, he's talked very openly about the fact that he had no idea what he was doing. He didn't understand the number of people he needed to really make a film. They didn't have the equipment they needed to make a film. Really, they wanted to be moving around a lot, and they didn't have dollies, so they used long lenses inside so they could get a lot in one, in one shot. But then people were like, oh my God, that stylistic choice. And it was all mistake and chance and serendipity and improvisation. And then that sort of formed itself into a style. And he said that the things that, people really pointed out as being individual and new and exciting from Shadows were mostly mistakes and mostly improvisation. And they worked for a long time on Shadows. They shot for weeks using his script, but then they kind of did away with the script, and there was a lot of improvisation. And again, a lot of mistakes. He said in one interview, he said, he said he didn't know that he needed a script supervisor. So they would do a bunch of takes, and then he would say, great, print take 3. But it was nobody's job to write down print take 3. So they literally didn't know which take in the end needed to be printed, which meant they had to print everything, which is timely and expensive. So it really was, rough and tumble in the beginning. And the film of his that's probably the most famous is A Woman Under the Influence. And part of the reason it's his most famous is because of the performance of Gena Rowlands in that film. And Gena Rowlands is in most of his films. And she is one of the greatest actresses of the 20th century, without a doubt. I mean, just an incredible, passionate force on film, kind of undeniable depth of expression when she's on the screen. And in A Woman Under the Influence, she's a wife and mother who's an active alcoholic in the depths of her addiction. And, you've just never seen anything like it on cinema. And in fact, Peter Falk, who was also in many of Cassavetes' films and was a friend of theirs, he's in the film playing her husband. And there's one scene in particular where she has a breakdown. And I've seen an interview of Gena Rowlands and Peter Falk talking about it. And he said, I knew when you were doing it that I had never seen anything like it. And he said, I've never seen anything since like it. It's just a landmark moment in acting, that film. But I do want to shout out also to the film Faces, which was the first Cassavetes film that I saw. And so it just blew open my synapses. I just couldn't believe what I was watching, how free and alive it was, how incisive it was, how much it upended my sense of perspective, and how uniquely it came at the scenes and the characters in it, and how totally inside their experiences we were. So Faces is incredible. Shadows is an incredible achievement, especially given, what they were working with and what they weren't working with. And again, Cassavetes had a whole group of actors working with him, most notably his wife and fellow actor Gena Rowlands, but also Ben Gazzara, Peter Falk, Seymour Cassel were in a lot of his films. And so there was this kind of community of common language and trust and commitment to creativity, which I think can always help, an artist go deeper and deeper and deeper. So big shout out to John Cassavetes, who's no longer with us. He died in the mid 80s, but a trailblazer in every way, a true Sagittarian, fiery artist who I'm so grateful graced us with his work. And also it's incredible. His acting performances are incredible in his own films, but then also in other people's films. He's in an early Sidney Poitier film that I love called Edge of the City, directed by Martin Ritt. It's a great performance by him. He's in Rosemary's Baby, which I'm sure funded A Woman Under the Influence. He's in The Dirty Dozen. It's always exciting to see him on camera in the Hollywood films or in his own films. So just please, if you haven't checked out John Cassavetes, go check out anything by him. It's all stimulating and worthy. And if you have checked him out, tell me which work of his you like the best in the comments. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next Wednesday. Thanks for watching Real Takes. Hit the subscribe button below so the algorithms will tell you when new episodes are out. And if you want to support Real Takes, please visit my Patreon page where you can join at any tier from $2 to $100 per thing I make. The $15 tier is specifically about supporting Real Takes, and you'll get behind the scenes information and be thanked in future videos. See you next Wednesday.